Today, we're going to dive into a concept that feels so now, but it actually has a name that's hundreds of years old. We're talking about that quiet, creeping feeling of things falling apart. Not with a big explosion, but with a slow, almost silent whisper.
You know the feeling, right? Maybe it's a huge company that used to be a titan of industry and now it just fades away. Or a friendship that felt rock solid but then slowly, quietly unravels. It's that system everyone counted on that just stops working. Not because of one big disaster, but because of 1,000 tiny failures you never even noticed. It's kind of like discovering rot in a piece of wood that looked perfectly fine from the outside. There's no single moment you can point to and say, that's when it broke. It's just this gradual, creeping awareness that things are not what they used to be. The whole collapse happens so slowly, it almost feels natural. And here's the wild part. This very specific kind of decay, this slow motion collapse we're all so familiar with, it's not a new anxiety at all. In fact, classical demonology actually gave this exact force a name, a personality. And that name is Agares. Now, he's not the demon you call for a sudden catastrophe or some violent, fiery end. No, he's something way more subtle, and maybe, because of that, a whole lot more dangerous. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? Agares represents that power that erodes things from the inside out. He doesn't need to burn the city to the ground. He just has to make everyone forget why they built the walls in the first place. And then they just crumble on their own. So, where did this idea, this personification of slow decay, even come from? Well, to really get it, we've got to look back at its mythological roots. Okay, so if you go back to this famous 17th century book on demonology, the Ars Goetia, he's ranked incredibly high. He's the second spirit listed, a duke, with a massive amount of power. But all that power isn't for some big flashy war. It's for a quiet, patient siege against the very idea of structure itself. The imagery they used for him is just packed with meaning. He's often shown riding a crocodile and carrying a hawk, and that's not random at all. Think about it. The crocodile represents this ancient, patient predator, just waiting below the surface for the perfect moment of weakness. And the hawk? It's all about sharp perception, seeing those weaknesses from a great distance. It's a perfect metaphor for his whole method. Watch, wait, and only make your move when the foundation is already starting to give way.
So, if he's not using fire and brimstone, what are his weapons? How does this slow collapse actually happen in practice?
Well, his first weapon, and this one is super subtle, is language itself. The old texts say he can teach all languages, but think about what that means symbolically. It's about the breakdown of communication. When words start to lose their shared meaning, when truth becomes just a matter of opinion, well, that's when the very glue holding a society together starts to dissolve.
And his second tool? It targets leadership. But not in the way you'd think. Under his influence, leaders don't get overthrown in some dramatic coup. No, they just give up. They get worn down by exhaustion, they lose faith in what they're even doing, and they just quietly walk away. And this is the truly chilling part. The institution, the company, the government, on paper it all still exists. The building is still there, the titles are still there, but it's completely hollow. It's just a shell with no one steering the ship, no purpose driving it forward. Nothing has actually broken, but everything has already fallen apart. Now, all of this might sound like some dusty old mythology, but the reason Agares is so fascinating right now is just how deeply this whole concept resonates with our own time. It feels incredibly familiar. I mean, we see this everywhere, don't we? In political institutions that have all the ceremony but seem to have lost their core function. You see it in our digital world, where words and meanings shift so fast that having a shared conversation feels impossible. And you definitely see it in traditions that become empty rituals we do out of habit, right before we forget to do them at all. It's that slow, quiet hollowing out of things we just took for granted. And this is why he feels like a demon made for our era. He doesn't thrive in chaos or revolution. His perfect breeding ground is stability. Stability that's gotten lazy, that's forgotten why it exists. He thrives in the system that's just running on autopilot, long after anyone remembers why they turned it on. All right, so let's try and pull this all together. What's the real lesson here, the takeaway from this powerful ancient metaphor?
When you stack him up against the more famous demons of fire and destruction, Agares seems almost boring. But his impact? It's arguably so much more permanent. You can rebuild a city that's been burned down, but how do you rebuild a culture that has simply forgotten how to believe in itself?
That's the real key, isn't it? You don't feel his influence in some big moment of terror. You feel it years later, when you finally look around and think, wait, how did everything get like this? When did this all fall apart? The collapse he brings is so gradual that by the time you notice it's happened, it just feels like it was inevitable.
So ultimately, this is the thing to remember. Agares isn't really about destruction. He's about the slow, quiet death of purpose. He's that little voice that whispers that it's too much work to maintain things, that our traditions are silly, that our beliefs are naive. He is the demon of just letting go, one tiny thread at a time. And that leaves us all with a pretty sharp question to ask ourselves, doesn't it? In our own lives, in our communities, in our societies, what are the crucial foundations that we've just stopped paying attention to? What are we allowing to erode simply because of our own quiet, collective neglect?